Bible prophecy has gotten a bad name, not because it isn't true. The Bible is true, and God's prophetic utterances and the words that he gives is always true. It's how it has been understood and how some people tend to use Bible prophecy. I want to turn to 2 Peter chapter 1 and verse 19. And today we're going to try to understand why it is so important to understand Bible prophecy. And not only to understand it, certainly how to apply it, but understand why we even have it in the first place, and what is it, and what part of the Bible is Bible prophecy. Just how important is this? And we're going to answer some of these questions. And I will tell you beforehand, some of these answers are going to be quite surprising to you. And because we're going to depart from the normal way of talking about prophecy and teaching prophecy than what you've heard. And hopefully it's quite helpful to you to put it all in the proper perspective. 2 Peter chapter 1 verse 19. And so we have the prophetic word confirmed, which you do well to heed as light that shines in a dark place until the day dawns and the morning star rises in your hearts. Now, the old King James says we have a more sure word of prophecy. What Peter says here, or that's the way it's translated in the New King James, we have the prophetic word confirmed. It's very interesting what you might mean by the prophetic word. We're going to define this as we go along. And it has been confirmed. It's been confirmed over and over again, which Peter then is referring to the events that he himself personally experienced. You can read the context of the chapter in which he was one of the three who received the vision of the transfiguration on the mount with Jesus himself, and where Jesus was transfigured, and he heard it himself. He said, "These are the words that were spoken. This is my beloved Son, hear you him." And all of this was said. And he heard this, and meaning then that who this Jesus is, the fact that he came, and you had all of the prophecies, and it now came to be and to culminate at the time of his first coming. And there was so much more to it than that, because there was also his second coming, which he is then saying is going to happen, certainly because the first coming took place. And one builds on the other. He says, we have this prophetic word confirmed, which you do well to heed as a light that shines in a dark place until the day dawns. This is very interesting how prophecy then is somehow revealed, and it shows the future. It shows what is going to happen. He speaks of it as a light shining in a dark place until the day dawns. And then, of course, it becomes very clear. You've seen sunup many times. All of us have. And it's dark, and then it gradually gets lighter and lighter and lighter and becomes clear. And all of a sudden, the whole vista opens up to you, where you can see in clear daylight, wow, what you didn't see before. Now, he's talking about prophecy here, and how it does open up to you in a clarity which maybe at one time you didn't have, how it does open up more and more to you as time goes on. He says, knowing this first, that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Apparently that could have been a problem. For prophecy never came by the will of men, but by holy men of God, spoke as they were moved by the Holy Spirit. In other words, it came from God. This was not something generated strictly from the imagination of men as to what they thought it was going to be. We do have a lot of people who try to predict the future, and they don't know the future. They can't tell you what the future is, but God can. And it's all been written down for us. As I said, the problem is in the proper understanding of it. The problem is the private interpretation. Well, why? Why do people delve into prophecy to start with? Further, why do they want to have a personal or private interpretation of prophecy that apparently no one else has. That's what a private interpretation means. Simple answer. They want to be considered a prophet. This is not hard to figure out. They want to be considered a prophet. This is for personal gain. God is the only one glorified and proven to be true and correct by the prophecies he gives. And he does that. That's one of the reasons he gives it, by the way, and we'll see that as we go along. But the private interpretations have been the downfall of a lot of people. It still is. We're still hearing private interpretations and specific events or let's say occurrences that people speak about, they prophesy about, claiming to have certain special and esoteric knowledge that they want to pass on to other people. And it's only for one reason, and that is to establish themselves as someone important from God. And you should recognize that too, because it's very clear to them how important they are. And so, and he wants, sometimes it's a she, most of the time it's a he, who say, well, we're the ones, we are the special ones, the chosen ones, and everything else. You know how it goes. All right. The second issue is end-time prophecies. People set dates. Once again, this is to prove a person a prophet. The only one, the special one who knows God's time. Now, this kind of thing shows how little people know about prophecy whenever they start setting dates or times when this is going to happen or when that is going to happen. It's written vaguely enough to where you don't know. You can go to Daniel chapter 12. You can, and especially that's about certain days and everything's happening. Try to figure it out, and then you come tell me, and then I will say maybe you shouldn't attend here anymore. No, I wouldn't quite do that, but well, I might. Yeah. Depends on how far your eyes kind of stand out from your head whenever you give me this kind of information. I might say, but I think you need to find another place to meet. No, we're not into that. All right. So we're not the end time prophecies. I've got a whole section on that next week on end time prophecies as opposed to prophecy. This is a very important distinction. The third problem is that students of Bible prophecy look at events only. In other words, they see prophecy in this way: past events, present events, and then, of course, moving on to future events. And whenever you do that, you don't understand what prophecy is for. Whenever you do that, there is something much bigger that's going on with prophecy than what singular events will tell you. Now, they're there for a reason too. However, it's a much larger thing than that, as we will see. Prophecy is to show his people what God is doing and to help them understand where they are in God's great plan that he is carrying out. And even if they, and they'll want to know, and everybody should want to know, if they are in that plan, if they are a part of that plan, if they are a participant. And if you are, you should be an active participant in it. But it reveals God's will for you, and it reveals God's will for all of mankind. Now, this is quite extraordinary when you understand prophecy in the right way as to what you will really understand when it's when you get the scope of prophecy. But prophecy, so much of the time, is relegated to obscure events that are end time only. And that's how they look at prophecy. Only the last few years, that is, occurrences that will take place just before the end of the age. And as a result, there is an attempt to see the fulfillment of these prophecies as imminent. They can occur at any time. And we tend to look at that. We look at events. We get prophecy watchers, Germany watchers, beast watchers, as I call them, world watchers, and all these events, that people are looking at. And they also look at, well, what is happening to our countries of modern Israel, and then begin to try. Well, it's going to happen real soon. Just look at this. Well, I heard this a long time ago, and so you don't know. There is another question, and if I have time, I will answer it and explore it for a few minutes with you. Is that what if you knew somehow, which you won't know, but what if you did, that prophecy, or that in the end time, according to how the Bible speaks of it, the end of the age is 50 years away. What if it was 100 years? What if you knew that? I don't think you will know that. That's not part of God's plan for you to know that. But I'm just saying, what difference would it make to you? It would make a big difference to me. And not the one that you think it would. Matter of fact, let's cover this point right now before I go on. If you don't experience it, who will? Your children. And if they don't experience it, then who will? Your children's children. Oh, it's going to happen. No question about it. So that being the case, what would you do now? What would you do now? It says, a wise man lays up for his children and his children's children. In other words, what you do now and everything you do now, look into the eyes of your children. Look into their eye. You don't have any children, okay? But look into their eyes, if you had them. And tell me, why are you doing now what you're doing? You think about that for a while. Because if you don't experience it, they will. And somewhere along the line, your progeny, your flesh and blood is going to experience what we read here in the Bible. They're going to have to go through it, if it's not you. We tend to think that, well, I think because of the background I have, the experience I have, where I've come from and so on, what I believe, it would be nice if it would happen during my age. We all want it to happen sooner, don't we? Let's get this thing over with. Okay? Yeah, but what if you're just the preparation for another generation? What would you do? Now, a lot of people didn't do what was right when they came to that realization. They did just the opposite. Not only did they not prepare, they gave up on what they believed. I think it's one of the greatest impetus to not only stay with what you believe, but to reinforce it and to establish a community of people, God's people, who are going to remain close to God in anticipation of what you know is going to happen. Hence, we come to one of the ideas as to why we have Bible prophecy, to help you to understand what's going to happen, so whether it's your children, whether it's your grandchildren or great-grandchildren, whatever, are themselves going to be prepared. I realize there's a problem in that we tend to lose the truth within certain generations, and it tends to get watered down, and why does that have to be? Somebody explain that to me. I understand the fact of the matter, but you explain to me, why does it have to be? Now, once again, we reinforce the idea, why do we have Bible prophecy in the first place if it's not supposed to do something for us in this regard? Okay, I think I made my point on that. So it's something to consider, everyone. Now, let me come back to this subject. You need to understand, if we're going to even understand end time events, you need to understand it in the whole context of prophecy. If you understand prophecy in the way it was written, and you understand the will of God as revealed in the prophecies, you won't be making that kind of a mistake. And this is the approach we're going to take in the seminar next week, and hopefully people will come away with a lot better grasp of what Bible prophecy is all about. Let's understand several things first. How does God prophesy? This is important. And this will give you an idea about his purpose for prophecy and what we are supposed to learn. God is able to predict the future basically in two ways. And as we discuss them, I think you'll see it's probably a combination of both to some extent. One, God directly causes it to happen, or he sets in motion what will eventuate. Now, that's one point. That's not 2 points, by the way. I have another one after that. All right. We'll come back to that one in a moment. Secondly, to some extent it's related to the first, and that this is an understanding of cause and effect. Now, God can foretell events because he knows enough about the nature of things, or that certain things are going to happen. And he will work in conjunction with the natural order of things, with his intervention. He has the right to step in and cause certain things to happen. He sets up kings, he tells us in the book of Daniel, for one. He's the one behind that. You might say, well, the devil sets up yeah, with God's permission. This is how it works. The devil operates, but he operates under license. Here, he's got a license to operate until a certain point, and then it expires. So, and if he says, I want this person to be over this particular empire, or whatever it is, yeah, you're right. God says, and they have a discussion about it. And God gives him permission. He says, sure, go ahead, set it up. He's got to receive permission for this. So in that sense, God is in control, but God is permitting the devil to work out events on this earth, being in the way that the devil does, being the God of this world, and he has set in motion himself certain things to happen because of what he has said, what he has taught, what he's got people to believe, the deception and so on, and things are going to happen in a certain way, and he wants things to go his way. And God says, you can try this for a while, but overall, it's going to come to an end. Now, the devil is hoping against hope that doesn't work that way. He's hoping he's going to win and prove that he's right all along, and he has always been right in what he has come up with, his way of life, his philosophy, his way of get or self-importance, and how he's promoted this to people. He's so sure he's right. And so everything he does is to prove to God, all of the other angels, anything else, he wants to prove himself to be right. Well, he's going to show that he's not right. And he has caused more suffering and misery, and he's going to be the one who's going to cause mankind to come to his end, which God will not permit, for that very reason. He doesn't care what happens in the meantime, but he's going to prove he's right. That's his object. Now, God then, however, has his plan. He works in conjunction with what is happening down here, and he establishes his will. Now, we'll read that in a moment. I want to take these one at a time and not get too far ahead of myself on one or the other. God can plan, and he can know and predict the future through cause and effect. In other words, he knows what's going to happen because he knows enough. I think I can demonstrate this in Deuteronomy 31, beginning with verse 24. Deuteronomy 31, verse 24. Here is Moses. This is Moses' song, by the way. And so it was when Moses had completed writing the words of his law in a book, when they were finished. Okay, he's finished. That Moses commanded the Levites who bore the ark of the Lord, saying. Okay, now he's addressing the Levites here. Now, why is he addressing the Levites? Well, the Levites were responsible for teaching and to pass on God's word and his truth. So he says in verse 26, take this book of the law, put it beside the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there as a witness against you. Now, this is interesting. Moses is telling the Levites this. He says, for I know your rebellion and your stiff neck. If today, while I am yet alive with you, and you have been rebellious against the Lord, then how much more after my death? Now, do you think Moses is prophesying here? In one sense, he is more predicting than the prophesying. He's just simply saying that this is what's going to happen. And I know this is going to happen. And I will tell you this, he didn't need hardly any special revelation to know that it was going to work out this way. He's looking at an end of 120 years of life. He's seen enough, he's seen them enough, that he just knows what they're going to do. He said, gather to me all the elders of your tribes and your officers, that I may speak these words in their hearing. So I want them to hear this too. Bring the elders, bring the officers, and call heaven and earth to witness against them. For I know after my death you will become utterly corrupt. Okay, this is pretty tough stuff now. You will become utterly corrupt and turn aside from the way which I have commanded you, and evil will befall you in the latter days, because you will do evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger through the work of your hands. Then Moses spoke in the hearing of all the assembly of Israel the words of this song until they were ended. So he's telling him straight up, I know what you're going to do. Moses was uttering a prediction. How did he know it would happen? Did it happen? Yes, it did happen. It's terrible to think that here they were being warned, look, I know they had probably the best of intentions. And to give them credit, the generation after Moses kind of stayed rather strong, as we're told in the book of Judges. Then the next generation, and then the generation, it was just gone. And then God had to periodically reestablish his truth, which he did through prophets and then through a kingship of David. And even then that had problems after David and then along with Solomon and after that. So he's giving a prediction here. Now, here's the point. Can God, in his greater wisdom and foresight, look into the future to say certain things that will happen? Because he was a lot smarter than Moses. Yes, he can. He knows the past and he knows the present. And based on what he has seen, he can say with certainty what is exactly going to happen. So God says, he does speak confidently about a captivity as a matter of punishment. National punishment, national chastisement for the fact that they have departed from God. Both captivities, I'm not talking about of Israel and Judah, I'm talking about the initial captivities from when they were in the land that God had promised Abraham before, and then an end time captivity also. He can prophesy both. Now he speaks in terms of what he will bring upon them and so on. He speaks in those terms. Now, which in one sense you might say, well, God's doing this. Well, in one sense it's the natural order of things. You have an antagonism on the part of the devil toward God's people, that he chose a long time ago, way back in the book of Genesis, and he'll do everything he can to get rid of them, to wipe them out, try to get them to turn away from God, sin against God. And when he gets them to do that, then, of course, they're not going to be under God's protection, and they will be punished in some way or another. This captivity that he speaks of here, a national captivity, a national punishment that he's going to talk about. Some people have tried to say, well, this is not really going to happen in this way. It's a captivity in a different way. Don't be so sure. God can do whatever he wants to do. People didn't think the first one was ever going to happen. It happened. That's what empires do. The great empires that were predicted, prophesied to occur, God says, this is what they're going to do, and they started doing it. Moving whole nations, whole cities, whole populations, get them out of there. It's the only way they can control them. That happened. Will it happen again? Well, some people say, well, it's going to be a different kind of a captivity. We're going to be in debt. That's interesting. He describes it much worse than that, actually. So we're going to believe what he says. We're going to say, well, how's it all going to happen? Okay, I tend to take what he says, not with a grain of salt, but I take it literally. Okay, I don't think I have a lot of choice on that. Now, how does he know? There is such thing as cause and effect. Let me demonstrate this. In other words, he knows what's going to happen. He can tell what's going to happen. This doesn't mean he will not have some involvement in it to some extent, to either lessen the effect or cause certain things to happen that will enhance the effect. He can do that. But a lot of things, according to the natural order of things, that he is able to predict, prophesy, as it were, to say of a surety, this is going to happen. Now, two Proverbs. They're right together. Proverbs 13, verse 18. Let me show you just a little principle here that demonstrates the point. Poverty, Proverbs 13, 18. Poverty and shame will come to him who disdains correction, but he who regards a rebuke will be honored. We have something that happens. We have an attitude of a person. Poverty and shame. Richard gave a sermonette on this. You know, he's not going to take what his father has to say. He disdains correction. He comes to poverty and shame. You have cause and effect. Okay. But he who regards a rebuke will be honored. You might say it's quite simple. The book of Proverbs is full of this. You do one thing, this is going to happen. Verse 20. He who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will be destroyed. Has this happened? Too many times. So, does God know what he's talking about? The book of Proverbs, in one sense, is prophetic utterances. They say, if you do this, this will happen. Human wisdom? Or rather, is it God inspiring men who observe what men do in conjunction with the knowledge of God and God's laws, these are people who wrote the book of Proverbs, simply know how things would happen. This is knowledge God gave them. And so they were able to make certain predictions based upon how they know things simply will happen. Now, you know what young people do. They say, I think I'll try to beat the odds. It won't quite happen to me. And they're wrong. It always happens. You're not going to get away with anything. Now, this brings up a very interesting point. And to help us to understand some of these things, you have the same powers God has. Now not near to the same extent, but you can prognosticate. Doctors do this all the time. They give a prognosis of, well, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, here's how it's all going to go. How do you know? He's seen it all before. That's why he's the doctor. He can say, here's how it's going to happen. Says, anything that's going to change that? Well, yes, this could change it, or that could change it, or it's such a, sadly, a disease that nothing will change it. Or they'll tell you that. There's not a lot we can do. Okay, some of us have had this experience, with some of our loved ones, for instance. It has happened. Okay, so my father did this all the time. I've referred to this before. He said, if you do it this way, son, you're going to have to do it all over again. And was he a prophet? No, but he was uncannily right almost all of the time based on his experience. He could see the way I was going to do something was not going to work out. It was going to be wrong. He said, now if you do it this way, certain things are going to happen. Now how did he know? He was older than me. He knew. He'd seen this before. So he was able to make a prediction, short-term prediction, but a prediction nonetheless. And he always said this, because whatever you did, especially growing up on the farm, that there would be an effect. There would be a result. And if you didn't do things right, this would always happen. Now, my brother and I, being the type of persons we were, we would always try to take shortcuts. We'd always try to do things so fast and get out of work so we could go to the swimming hole or play ball or something like that, do anything but work. And so we would. And so we would have to come back and do twice or three or four times the amount of work as we did before just to straighten out. And Dad always knew. He could come back and say, he could look at what we did, and he could say, you did it this way, didn't you? And you didn't do it the way I told you to do it, didn't you? And so, I mean, what are we going to say? We were caught. Well, he knew, and he always knew. Now, you can do this. You can project into the future, and in some limited way, you can have insight in the way things will generally go. Not as much insight as God, of course. We all know that. But humans were created with this godly attribute or characteristic or ability, maybe is a better way of putting it. Animals were never endowed with this. They can tell the future. You can put a cow on a truck, head him toward the abattoir, or her. They have no idea what's going to happen. They probably don't even know what's happened when they're in the race heading toward being slaughtered, the final shot that they give them, boom, knock them over. Unless they sense something through instinct. They can't tell the future. They only know there's not enough food in the paddock. There's no water in the paddock. And they cast about trying to look for food or water. They don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or the following day. You can project. You can try to figure things out. You have an imagination. You can project into the future, and you can understand the way things are. If things keep going a certain way, here's going to be the results. You can project into eternity. Yes, you can. You were made this way. This is one of the endowments of God. Very important thing. So we ask then, how can God know? God knows. He knows better than us. It's important then that we listen to what he says, because he is 100% accurate. Now, as we get older, we may be not as accurate, and we're only short-term anyway. He can project down into the future. That might give you a little bit of an inkling as to how he can say there is going to be a beast power. Here's what they're going to do, and there are going to be two people, one a religious leader and one a civil leader, who is going to be at the head of this, and here's what they're going to do. You might say, well, you mean he doesn't cause that to happen? He knows it's going to happen. He simply knows what people will do. He knows how it's going to play out. He can think through from A to B all the way to Z and A to the first power, B, so he can go through the whole thing again, as far as you want to go. He's got the capacity and the ability to work through the whole thing logically and reasonably, because he knows the way things are, and say, hey, here is how it's going to turn out. Now, I want to go back to the point. To some extent, he knows, that is, he will be orchestrating and working out his plan. Now, which brings us to the next point. God makes it happen. The second way that he prophesies. Why? Well, God is not just in the business of making certain events. As I said before, this is the way we tend to look at it. God makes it happen because God has a plan. And he knows exactly where he's going, and he's going to work out his plan, irrespective of what anybody else does, or even what the devil does. He's going to be working out his plan. Let's go to Isaiah 46 and verse 8. He's got ways of doing this. Isaiah 46, verse 8. Now remember this, and show yourselves men. Isaiah 46, 8. Recall to mind, you transgressors. Verse 9. Remember the former things of old, for I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me. Now he's saying this in the context of people who take silver and gold and make idols, and they carry them around, and they can't speak, and yet they bow down and they worship them, and they pay more attention to this and the whole system that they set up, rather than God himself. So God is saying this, and he's saying this to Israel. Verse 10. Declaring the end from the beginning. We're not talking about events here. We're talking about what he is saying from the very start, why he did what he did at the beginning. Genesis, the first chapter, all the way to Revelation 22. He declares the end from the beginning, and from ancient times, things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand. The word counsel here means plan. You can check it out. I mean, a simple thing like Strong's Concordance will tell you plan. Plan, will. My counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. Calling a bird of prey from the east, a man who executes my counsel from a far country. This is a specific prophecy here that he's referencing, that he has also made elsewhere, about Cyrus, who, king of the Persians, would come and destroy Babylon, who would be the ones to take the Jews, whom Isaiah is prophesying to in Jerusalem, captivity. And he's saying, it's going to be somebody who's going to come and do my will. And he says this 200 years before it's going to happen. And he prophesies about another empire that's going to take place. And he's doing this to tell the Israelites through the prophet Isaiah that I'm God. You do whatever you want to do, set up your idols, sacrifice your children to them, do whatever you want. And they did. And they completely departed from God and God's laws, and they killed his prophets and his messengers. And God says, I'm going to tell you before it happens, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to send someone from the east. Now, like I said, you've got to tie this in with other specific prophecies that tells you who that person is, who is the bird of prey, a man who executes my counsel. He does step in, he does intervene, and he does say that certain things are going to happen because it's according to his counsel. Indeed, I have spoken it. I will also bring it to pass. I have purposed it. I will also do it. So, how does he prophesy? He does it. He brings it about. Now listen to me, you stubborn-hearted, who are far from righteousness. I bring my righteousness near, and it shall not be far off. My salvation shall not linger. I will place salvation in Zion, for Israel is my glory. Now, what he's doing here in that last statement is in one sense summing up what he is eventually going to do, and covers the whole gamut of prophecy. So he says, what I'm saying right here now is a part, only a part, of what eventually is going to take place. Now, we have to consider one fact, that we cannot be prophecy buffs trying to know what is going to happen next, or when the tribulation will begin, or some other such thing, when this is going to happen, when that's going to happen. The best question to ask is, do I know God's great plan? Do I know his counsel? And where am I on the continuum of what God is doing? Where am I in that timeline? Do I know? And you ought to look at it that way. And that will tell you a lot more, because that is what he reveals. How many people will give up because all of the great end time events did not happen when they thought they should? How many people will come into the church for temporal reasons, thinking they were going to be saved from tribulation by going to a place of safety? You still hear this over and over again. I'm not discounting any prophecies. I'm just saying there are reasons why people look at prophecy and say this is going to happen, and why they make certain changes in their lives to escape all of these things. And God says there's got to be a little bit more to it than that. How many then don't even believe God anymore because things didn't turn out the way they expected it to, which shows there were some wrong reasons as to why people came into the church to start with. There was some other expectation that did not eventuate. The wrong approach to prophecy can hurt you bad, really badly. The right approach can be one of the greatest forms of faith that you can have. God is God, and he will do what he says, and to have confidence in that. Now, there is another form of prophesying that we find in the New Testament. I want to cover this part. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 3. 1 Corinthians 14, verse 3. But he who prophesies speaks edification and exhortation and comfort to men. Now the word prophesies there is exactly what it means. Propheteo. I used to pronounce Greek words down in Melbourne. And Melbourne, you understand, is known for its Greek population. And these second-generation Greeks and sometimes first-generation Greeks would be sitting in my congregation, and I would try to pronounce these Greek words. And they would say, "We never heard of these words before." Well, that was because I was never pronouncing them correctly. And I would listen to them speaking Greek, and I would find out that I was so far off it wasn't funny. But anyway, take my word for it. The word means exactly what it says, prophesying or propheteo. That's the way it looks to me in the book anyway. But it says here, he who prophesies speaks edification and exhortation and comfort to men. He who speaks in a tongue edifies himself, but he who prophesies edifies the church. Very interesting idea, isn't it? Verse 5. I wish you all spoke with tongues. Now, it ceased after a while. But even more than that you prophesied. For he who prophesies is greater than he who speaks with tongues, unless indeed he interprets, that the church may receive edification. So this speaking in tongues is, look, this is a lot of show, the way some people did it. And it was for a purpose, a temporary purpose back then. Prophesying, that's different. Now, what does he mean? How might this work in the New Testament? When you speak to others, that is prophesying in this way, You are holding out to others what they could be. For instance, if you gave a message on, say, the mind of Christ, for instance, you gave a sermon on that, you would be holding out to the person to whom you are speaking the direction they have to go. That would be directional. It would imply the future. Certainly it would, because you're not there yet. Okay, we would assume that. That is what they would be like, or what they could become. This is entirely the future. So whenever you speak to a person to edify them or to exhort them, you want to move them toward their future, to acquire and to be something that they are not yet. Everybody with me on that? Therefore, prophesying. You're speaking of the future to people. All edification is about the future. All edification or exhortation is prophesying in that sense. You're not there yet, but you work toward that end, to become as Christ, in the example that I just mentioned. 1 Samuel chapter 3 and verse 1. This is very interesting. 1 Samuel chapter 3 and verse 1. Here was young Samuel at the tabernacle in Shiloh. And the boy Samuel ministered unto the Lord before Eli. And the word of the Lord was rare in those days, and there was no widespread revelation. Very interesting. Well, there had been before. Now at this point there wasn't. And God was about to begin to use prophets that he was going to send Israel, and starting with the first great prophet of Samuel. The priesthood were not doing their job. Israel, and especially the priesthood themselves, Eli and Eli's sons, were corrupt. Eli allowed his sons to be corrupt. And so, where's God's involvement? To teach the nation and to show them what they should be doing and to give them some guidance as to what they should do and where they should go. They got enemies around. Who's going to help them, show them what to do? No revelation. The old King James says vision. There's no vision. If you want to use that word the way we use it today, where's the future? Do they see it? They don't see it. They need God to tell them what it is. And they would, being who they were, God should have been involved in their lives all the time. And the word of the Lord coming to them through, say, the high priest, for instance, Eli, for example. Now, God is going to move things along here. He says, I'm going to send them prophets. And so he did. Now, they didn't like the prophets either. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1. God will speak to you. God will speak to you of the future. God generally, if God calls a person, you being called? Okay, God calls you, it is about your future. Because your mind is opened as to what God would want from you, what God would have you to be, and what God would have you to become, and what you got to do to get there. It's about your future. He's giving you a vision. And you're either going to march according to that tune, to what you see and what you comprehend, or you're going to dismiss it and say, I'll live in the present. I don't have to worry about it. Things will just happen. They'll happen, they happen. It is what it is. We say that all the time now. It is where did that come from? It is what it is. God says, I'll tell you what is. This is the way it's going to be. And here's what I'm holding out to you. Now, Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1, God who at various times and in various ways spoke in times past to the fathers by the prophets, well, which is what we just referred to, has in these last days spoken to us by his Son, whom he has appointed heir of all things, through whom he made the worlds. This is entirely futuristic. God envisions the future. You might say, well, does God live in it? God lives in the future. in the sense he sees and he understands things as he knows they're going to be because he has the power to bring it about. Guess what? You have the chance to be a part of that. Or you can branch out on your own and try to make a future for yourself in some very short-term way. It's not the best idea. So prophecy, then, has to do with the future. In the Old Testament sense, of course, and in the New Testament sense. So every sermon we give, I would hope, for you, is futuristic. That is, it helps you to see and to understand where you are. Now, the whole thing, let me conclude with this one point. And I hope by next weekend this will be firmly established. Is that what part does prophecy actually play? What part does it have? And do we really understand what it is? All right. Now, you've heard it been said, 30% of the Bible is prophecy. You've heard that? You've heard that. You believe that? You don't want to commit, do you? Because you already heard that I was going to give you a different answer. Right. What about 60%? How about 90%? Look, let me explain something to you. The Bible is 100% prophecy. All right. Can we grasp this point? It's 100% prophecy. When God starts something in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, it's all about the future. Okay, I'll leave you with that one. Everything in the Bible leads to one basic theme, one basic idea all the way through. He doesn't deviate. He doesn't change. God knows exactly where he's going. And he gives us, and so when you understand prophecy, you should understand it in this way. And don't get bogged down in the narrow little bits and pieces of vague prophecies. And we can talk about them. But we do so after you understand the whole scope of prophecies and what God's plan and what God's purpose is. Now, you already know what this is. You just probably haven't thought about it in that way before. And it is quite far-reaching, quite exciting. And it holds out some tremendous hope for us as we go forward in a darkened world. And we wait for the time that the dawn will appear, as it were, and lights up the whole future for us, because that is indeed going to happen.